Hello, litigators and opinionators. Court is now in session. You guys, this tragedy that I'm about to talk to you about is very controversial. And I'm going to have to handle this one with kid gloves because I have to admit, I have never experienced postpartum depression. So I do not know what individuals go through when they experience it, but it sounds like it is very disturbing. And we'll actually go over what the medical definition is when we get to that part of the tragedy, guys. But my Lord, this is about a family, a young lady, too, that was actually a nurse, which is kind of surprising that she would do something like this given her career. But this was just, it looked on the outside like this was the perfect, picture perfect family. I mean, you have this successful mother who is a nurse, and she has 3 children. In this picture, there's only 2 of the 3 children in the picture, with a lovely father who truly loved this woman to pieces, y'all. But I'm on the more controversial end of this tragedy where I don't personally have any type of empathy for the young woman, but there are people who have experienced postpartum depression and they feel different about it. So let's talk about this tragedy, y'all. Let's get into what's going on here. Now, this midwife mom, she checked herself into a psychiatric hospital with postpartum depression, but then she was sent home with antidepressants 3 weeks before she strangled kids because a voice allegedly told her to kill them and herself. Now, there are some controversies in terms of whether people really believe a voice told her that. In particular, the prosecutor who is handling this case does not believe that this young lady really heard voices. In fact, they think that she is lying. And the reason why they think she's lying, because she had never talked about hearing voices before. She all of a sudden starts claiming that she hears voices after she meets with her criminal defense attorney's psychiatric doctor who was involved. And this doctor basically may have manipulated her into calling her family members. Or calling her family members, in particular, calling her husband and telling her husband that she was hearing voices. So there is some questions as to whether she really was hearing voices. And we're going to hear from the prosecutor who actually laid out the facts very much in detail. But before we do that, let's talk about what postpartum depression is. I feel like it's imperative that we talk about postpartum depression because of the fact that it tends to affect a lot of women, and sadly, no one talks about it. Okay. Postpartum depression, it's a symptom of depression after childbirth, and it could vary. It can range from mild to severe. And the symptoms is called the baby blues, and it can last only a few days to weeks or 2 after your baby is born. And it includes mood swings, anxiety, sadness, irritability, feeling overwhelmed, crying, reduced concentration, appetite problems, and trouble sleeping. Okay. Postpartum depression may be mistaken for baby's blues at first, but for symptoms are more intense and last longer. These may eventually interfere with your ability to care for your child and handle other daily tasks. Symptoms usually develop within the first few weeks after giving birth, but they may begin earlier during pregnancy or later up to a year after birth. Postpartum depression symptoms can include depression, depressed mood or severe mood swings, crying too much, difficulty bonding with your baby, withdrawing from family and friends, loss of appetite or eating much more than usual, inability to sleep, called insomnia or sleeping too much, overwhelming tiredness or loss of energy, less interest and pleasure in activities you used to enjoy, intense irritability and anger, fear that you're not a good mother, hopelessness, feelings of worthlessness, shame, guilt, or inadequacy, reduced ability to think clearly, concentrate, or make decisions, restlessness, severe anxiety, panic attacks, thoughts of harming yourself or your baby, reoccurring thoughts of death and suicide. This one right here, thoughts of harming yourself or your baby, comes into play in this case, okay? Because it seems like this young lady had been thinking about thoughts of harming herself and her baby. Now, there could be such terminology as postpartum psychosis. With postpartum psychosis, it's a rare condition that usually develops within the first week after delivery. The symptoms are severe and they include feeling confused and lost, having obsessive thoughts about your baby, hallucinating and having delusions, having sleeping problems, having too much energy, feeling upset, feeling paranoid, making attempts to harm yourself or your baby. And even the other parent can experience this type of depression, but we're not going to get into that. Fathers can experience it and so forth. But I just wanted to at least to give you a brief background before we get into this case, because this case has everything to do with postpartum depression. And a lot of people are coming to bat for this young lady. I personally, not one of them. I feel like this young lady thought this out and planned it out and even took strategic, careful thoughts and plans to ensure that she was alone with those children. So I don't have much empathy for the young lady, but a lot of people, I mean, thousands of nurses have come to defend this young lady. Parents have, but I'm on the other far end of the spectrum where I don't have much empathy for this young lady for strangling her 3 children without any form of empathy she had for her kids. But anyways, the midwife mother who strangled her 3 children, let's just put her picture up while we read about her. She strangled her 3 children in an apparent drug-induced fog while suffering postpartum depression, checked herself into a psychiatric hospital seeking help 3 weeks before she killed the kids, and she strangled them to death, but was released with a prescription for antidepressants. And her attorney, her defense attorney, has come out and spoke, and he claims that she was over-medicated, and basically because of this over-medication that she was given and was just over medicated, it caused this psychosis to form and basically caused her to not think rationally and just carry out these murders. But I just disagree with it because of how she carefully took the steps to commit this crime, y'all. We'll get into that. Lindsay Clancy, she's 32 years old. She's facing life in prison if convicted on first-degree murder of the deaths of her children, Cora, 5, Dawson, 3, and Callan, 8 months old, on January 24th. On January 1st, Lindsay, who was herself a labor nurse, herself as Massachusetts General Hospital. So she's in Massachusetts. That's where she was a labor nurse hospital. Isn't that ironic, guys, that this young lady was delivering babies while at the same time thinking about ending the life of her 3 kids? I find that ironic. So she checked herself into the McLean Psychiatric Hospital in Belmont. So to me, she did take subsequent steps to try to get help. That's the one thing we take into consideration, that she did recognize that she had some issues and she tried to take steps to get help. Okay. She spent 5 days there, according to her attorney, Kevin Reddington, which her attorney, guys, is pretty amazing. I don't know who hired this attorney, but if you've heard him argue in court, he is amazing. This is going to be a battle of the attorneys when this case goes to trial, I tell you, because her attorney is really good. But anyways, the prosecution's pretty good too. So it's going to be a very interesting trial. But during which she complained about becoming addicted to benzodiazepines. So she started getting addicted to the drugs she was on. This young lady was heavily medicated, and her attorney is saying that because of these heavy amounts of medication, it caused her to experience psychosis, which then led to her engaging in this very horrific crime. This was one of her babies. And what was disturbing about this case, guys, is there's so many sweet pictures that people talk about on her Facebook where she is seen, cuddling her babies, expressing her deep love for her children. And just, people have really saw her as this stellar mother. All the while behind closed doors, she had this form of detachment. She wasn't really attached to her kids. She had a resentment towards her kids. In fact, she wrote about it in a journal, talking about how she resented two of her children because she felt like they prevented her from bonding with her other child. So it seemed as though, even though she was hugging her kids and pretending that she loved them, it was like there was this form of detachment she had. It's very sad here. She's seen here shown hugging her daughter Cora there. And that's just sad, man. That is so sad. On January 1st, Lindsay presented herself to doctors at Clean Hospital in Belmont. She spent 5 days there, according to her attorney, and she was over-medicated while she was there. Doctors at the hospital decided to take her off Seroquel, a drug used to treat schizophrenia and depression. So if they gave her a drug used to treat schizophrenia, I wonder if she was dealing with some type of schizophrenia. I wonder if she was schizophrenic. That's an interesting question I have. Okay. She was then given trazodone, another antidepressant, Antifan, and a branded version of lorazepam, according to her attorney. She was given way too much drugs. That could lead her to some type of form of psychosis. I feel like she might have a defense. This is not going to be to me, I don't feel like it's going to be a slam dunk case, but maybe so. We'll hear from the prosecution, which I feel is convincing too. The circumstances surrounding Lindsay's discharge from the hospital remain unclear, and it is also unclear whether she even told doctors that she felt homicidal. In the weeks before the killings, she told her husband she felt that she was going to take her life. Her attorney says she went back to the doctor after leaving McLean, but he has not specified what drugs she was even given. 20 days later, she strangled, guys, her 3 children. It's so sad. And then tried to unalive herself by slitting her wrists and jumping from a top floor bedroom of the family home, y'all. She tried to jump out the bedroom and thought that was going to kill her. However, it didn't kill her. When she fell, she was still alive, except for she's now paralyzed from the waist down. A spokesman for the hospital declined to give details on her care or discharge, citing privacy laws. Now, look at the long list, guys, here of all the drugs she was on. This is insane. Insane. I think the large amount of drugs this young lady was on and prescribed and taking is going to go towards her defense to try to allege that she was experiencing some form of psychosis at the time. So drugs prescribed to Lindsay Clancy over 8 months, according to her attorney, was Klonopin, Valium, Antivan, Zoloft, Atrapoline, Remeron, Prozac, Trazodone, Latimol, Seroquel, Buspirone, hydroxine, Ambien. Oh my gosh. I never seen so many drugs prescribed to one person in my life. I don't even think this is even proper prescriptions right here. Is this doctor even? What kind of doctor is this giving this girl? How many drugs? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 different drugs? Yeah, that's way too much. She was way overly medicated for over 8 months. They doing too much. That is way too much. No wonder this girl was probably experiencing some type of psychosis. Okay. A spokesman for the hospital declined to give details on her care or discharge. Due to privacy laws and our ethical standards, we are unable to comment on specific patient cases. The complexities of mental health are different for each individual, and similarly, treatment strategies vary depending on each person's unique needs. Whether it be proven and effective medications, psychotherapy, peer support, complementary and alternative medicine, or combination of multiple approaches, it is important that any care plan be evidence-based and derived from patient-centered discussions and shared decision-making, he said. Prosecutors told court yesterday that Lindsay later told her husband she heard a man's voice telling her to unalive herself and her children, and that it was her only chance So that sounded like she was experiencing psychosis. However, the prosecution says that she never talks about hearing voices until she met with her attorney, y'all. And all of a sudden, she's assigned this psychiatrist from her attorney, and now she's hearing voices. So they think that these words were planted by her attorney. Her attorney says she had become a shell of herself in the months since her third child's birth, and that she had been overprescribed an astonishing combination of 13 different drugs to help her cope. And the very disturbing thing about this woman is she explained that she cannot feel any emotions. Like, she doesn't feel any emotions at all, like no sadness, no happiness, nothing. So when you see her, even in the hearing, she looks completely stealth. This is exactly her facial expression the whole entire time that the prosecutor was talking about what she had done. There was not one tear. You would think that if she truly had any type of attachment or remorse or empathy for what she did to those 3 children, she would reflect on that and cry and feel bad. No, there was not one tear that was shed during the entire hearing. That, to me, I felt was very disturbing. That obviously something that this woman is dealing with, but she doesn't seem to be remorseful for what she did, which is very disturbing. She just seems to be trying to defend what she did by saying that she heard a voice. So Lindsay Clancy was arraigned from her hospital bed yesterday. She is paralyzed after trying to kill herself by jumping from a top floor window of her home. So yes, so she's alive, but she is now paralyzed. She can no longer move. And this is the picture I showed you here with her husband, Patrick, and their oldest child, Cora, 5, and Dawson, 3. And these kids are so adorable. Look at those cute little chunky cheeks for the little boy. He is so cute. And the little girl. This is sad, man. There's people out there who really love kids and want kids, and I don't know. I can't really talk on the fact of postpartum because we don't know what she was going through. Here's the beautiful 3 children. They are absolutely beautiful, beautiful kids. Look at that brand new newborn child, the little boy there. He's so precious. Oh my goodness. So it seems that once she gave birth to that 3rd child, that postpartum got really worse. After strangling the kids, Lindsay tried to cut her own wrist. She then jumped from a window at her family's home. Baby Callan, 8 months, died in the hospital. So sad. Cora and Dawson died at home. So the little 8-month-old baby was the fighter of all of them. Even though he's the smallest one and the youngest one, that little newborn baby, he tried to live. He was in the hospital for a little bit trying to fight through, but he didn't make it. So sad. What a cute baby. Oh my God. Look at that pretty little girl and the boy with that cute little smile on the cheeks. Oh, the Clancy home in Duxbury, Massachusetts, where the family were killed in the basement. So you can see here where their bedrooms are of the house. That's where she jumped from. She jumped from these bed. I think it's a bedroom in the back of the house, but at least she jumped from, because it's the same level of the windows in the back. So, I mean, yeah, of course she wouldn't die from that. I mean, she definitely broke her a lot of bones, y'all. She broke a lot of bones, but she's just, it remains unclear how many drugs she was told to take once or who was overseeing her care. Her attorney says her case boils down to a tragic failure by society to help new mothers suffering with postpartum depression, y'all. It is an issue that we do need to talk about because a lot of women suffer in silence, y'all. They deal with a lot of postpartum thoughts. But this young lady, I don't feel much empathy for, just considering her planning of this. She really thought this out, y'all. We're going to go into how I think she did think it out. That was the problem I have with her, is that she thought it out and she intentionally did it. She intentionally sent her husband on this scavenger hunt, basically, to go find medication and go get food, like takeout food, which is not the norm. Apparently the husband says they don't normally go eat out a lot of times, but she strategically told him to go to this far restaurant so she could carry out this crime, y'all. So I just feel like this was more of an intentional, even though she was battling postpartum depression. The fact that the subsequent steps she took, to me, is the disturbing part I have with this case. Her attorney says her case boils down to a tragic failure. Oh, it remains unclear. Oh, a tragic failure to help new mothers suffering with postpartum depression. Yeah, but we shouldn't excuse what she did. I know that women are dealing with postpartum depression and there needs to be more treatment for women that are dealing with postpartum depression. But we don't hear of high statistics of mothers going out killing all their kids. We don't hear of this all the time. It's not like this is happening every day. So there was something really severe going on with this particular woman that was even more severe than the typical postpartum depression that women deal with. Even though women may have those thoughts, they're not going to go out and carry it out like this woman actually planned it out. Our society fails miserably in treating women with postpartum depression or postpartum psychosis. It's medicate, medicate, medicate. Throw the pills at you and see how it works, her attorney said. On January 24th, Lindsay was having one of her best days, according to her husband, Patrick, who says he has forgiven her. Yes, y'all, her husband has forgiven her. He wrote this beautiful, heartfelt message tribute to her, and we'll try to read that too. She took Cora to the pediatrician in the morning, then returned home to play with Cora and Dawson in the snow outside. You just see her behavior, guys, how she took her kid to the man. She goes and plays with them out in the snow, and all of a sudden she strangles them. It's interesting. But let's look at the timeline. The timeline guide is where the disturbing information comes into play. Timeline of tragedy: Lindsay Clancy played with kids in the snow, then strangled them. To me, the fact that she specifically asked her husband to go to this location far away to go get takeout, and she's like, "Oh, I'm not cooking," and the husband found that very odd because that's not the norm of what they do. To me, I find that disturbing. Okay. So January 24th, let's talk about what happened. So the morning of January 24th, Lindsay takes Cora, her 5-year-old daughter, to a pediatrician appointment. Afternoon, Lindsay, Cora, and Dawson, they play in the yard, building a snowman. At 4:02 p.m., Lindsay searched kids' Miralax. At 4:13, she searched takeout 3V and how long it would take to drive there. This is where I find the red flag at, guys, right there. So she was doing these different Google searches, right? She specifically thought of these 2 steps because she was trying to figure out a way to get her husband out of the house. Now, because she was dealing with a lot of this psychosis and postpartum depression, her husband had basically changed his schedule and started staying home every day with her so that he can monitor her. And he could monitor her and the kids because he knew that she was battling this postpartum depression and the psychosis. So he kept an eye on her 24/7. He never left. He worked from home, everything from home. So the fact that she strategically did these Google searches to figure out how she could get her husband to leave the house and to drive this far distance to this restaurant that they never usually typically go to me tells me this woman was trying to figure out a way to get that man out the house so she can carry out this murder. Because her thought was she was so done with her life that she didn't want her kids to live this life without her. And she already had this resentment to them because she felt they were the source of her unhappiness. And so she decided to try to get her husband out the house so she could carry out this crime. That's why I'm disturbed by this. And I took some time to research this before I talked about the tragedy because I wanted to get more details. And now that I know the timeline and the fact that she took the time to search for this term, kids Miralax, and then she searched takeout 3V and how long would it take to drive there? Though that key part there, how long would it take to drive there, is right where you see the intent. That is where this intent unfolds. She wanted to know how long it would take to drive there because she wanted to know if she would have enough time to carry out these murders and kill herself while her husband was gone. Because like I said, her husband had been staying at the house with her and the kids 24/7. He never left her sight or her presence because he knew she was battling this ongoing psychosis and postpartum depression. And he was trying to look out for her and the safety of the children also. Because she had even talked about at least one time of hurting the kids, thought about it. She wrote about it or whatever. So the fact that this woman did these searches to try to figure out how she was going to get her husband out the house is where I find this disturbing. I don't believe that she just randomly, spontaneously heard this voice after her husband leaves to kill the kids. That's a lie. Because if that was the case, why did she strategically do these searches to try to get this man to leave the house and to be gone for a long period of time? I'm not buying the whole hearing voices thing, guys. That's just my opinion. Now, I know a lot of people on different crime channels are really taking up for this girl, but you're not going to get that perspective over here, y'all. I'm sorry if that was what you were trying to look for over here. It's not going to happen because I'm going to keep it real. I'm just saying. Okay, anyway, at 4:47, Lindsay searches for local CVS and calls to check that they have Miralax. At 4:53, Lindsay texts Patrick, who was working in his home office. And it's interesting. Why did she go talk to him? Why she text him? That's interesting. They're in the same house, y'all. And instead of her just going to his office, she just texts him. Maybe she didn't want to bother him because he was working, maybe. So she just thought she'd text him. But she sends him a text message while they're in the same house and he's in his office. And she says, any chance you want to do takeout from 3V? I didn't cook anything. It's been a long day. Patrick texts back, yes. Now, you're going to hear from, well, we'll try to play a little bit of what the prosecutor said, but based on what the prosecutor said, Patrick found this to be very odd because normally they do not eat out. It's very rare occasions they eat out. This was very out of the norm for this family. So Patrick is already like, what? This is kind of weird, but hey, I'll just go with the flow because I love this woman. They just love each other to pieces. He would literally do anything for this woman, period. So if she wants takeout, she gets it. But, in the back of his head, he was like, this is kind of weird. This is not normal. We don't usually eat out like that. But I'll go along with the flow. Okay, I'll just go along with it. All right. So he texts back yes, because he just loves this girl to pieces. He'll do anything for her. At 5:06, y'all, Patrick asks her what she's going to order. And she replies, a Mediterranean power bowl. Patrick responded that he wanted the scallop and pork belly risotto. At 5:10 p.m., Lindsay says food orders over the phone. So she places the food orders. She calls this place, she places the food orders, right? But what I found disturbing, she chose that place for a particular reason, y'all, because it was far distance. Because she needed time to carry out these murders. It's heinous. She wanted to do this, guys. She wanted to kill him. She was in her right mind. She knew what she was doing. She knew what she was doing when she was carrying out these searches. Very logically typed out the right things that she thought of when she was typing it out. Very logically typed out how far it is to get to that restaurant. Very logically called up the restaurant and placed the orders and placed the exact orders that he requested. So you can tell she was in her right mind. So I'm not buying the whole psychosis thing. The woman knew exactly what she was doing, and she wanted him out of that house so she could carry it out. Her whole plan was to get him out that house because she knew he was never going to leave that house or leave her sight to protect her and the kids because he knew she was dealing with this psychosis issue. So that's why I find this case disturbing. I'm not going to be on the bandwagon like everybody else, and they're all parading around this girl, coddling her when she planned this out and knew exactly what she was doing. She wanted to kill those kids right along with herself. But when she tried to kill herself, it was a failed attempt. Because in her mind, she's like, I'm going out. They're going to go out with me. That was all intent. Very sad. Okay. Now, was she battling some demons? Yes. Because the word of God says we wrestle not against flesh and blood, but against principalities and spirits and all that stuff. So she was definitely dealing with some type of demonic force. But did she know what she was doing? In my humble opinion, yes, she did. Look at the steps. Look at the timeline. To me, the timeline tells it all. At 5:15 p.m., she texts Patrick, Pedalax liquid stool softener. That's when he left, right? He went to go get the food and he went to go get the items at the CVS, and he was having a hard time trying to find this Pedalax or whatever. So Patrick arrives at the CVS at 5:32. He gets there, and then at 5:33, he calls Lindsay, and the call is unanswered. Now, during that time, in my opinion, this is my theory, guys, just a theory. At 5:33, when he calls her, I believe, sadly, she was in the process of taking out and murdering these kids, y'all. Man, that's sad. While he's calling her, she's unaliving his kids. That's so sad. That's my theory, y'all. Because she doesn't answer the phone. That is so sad. Oh my gosh. Wow, these innocent kids that did nothing wrong, man. So, because she's all preoccupied during time, right? Then all of a sudden, 5:34, she calls him back. Call lasts for only 14 seconds. At 5:37, he leaves CVS. At 5:54, he enters 3V because remember, it's far away. She knew it was going to be far away. At 5:55, he leaves 3V. So he was only there for 1 minute. At 6:09, approximately 6:09, Patrick returns home and finds Lindsay in the yard, all battered and bruised and injured and all broken up. Her bones was all broken, right? She couldn't move at all. The 3 kids were in the basement, y'all, with exercise bands still tied around their necks. So horrific, guys. This was planned out. I mean, when people first heard about this tragedy, a lot of people were taken up for her because they didn't know the details that this woman actually sent her husband on a goose chase, basically, so that she could carry out these crimes, and thought about it and did Google searches and everything to figure out how long it would take this man to go to this restaurant that they don't even go to that often. Now, had they gone there before? Yeah, they've gone there before, but it wasn't a place where they go often, basically. Okay. And it's sad. Her husband, Patrick, was working from home at a basement. And it's just sad that, he gets home and he has to see that. So sad. When he arrived home at 6:09, guys, that's when he told the police that he heard silence when he entered the home. Can you believe it? And that's not normal in a house full of 3 kids, 3 little toddler babies. If you hear pure silence and you have 3 little babies like that, something's wrong. So that's why he pointed that out to the authorities, is that I heard silence. And that is you already know there's a red flag when you have babies in the house and it's silent. Either the kids are in something they shouldn't be into when it's quiet. You already know that as a parent. If you got the little kids and you hear pure silence, you know something wrong. They into something they shouldn't be doing when they quiet. But when he arrived, pure silence, he already knew something was wrong, right? So he starts already, his antennas are up. He goes around figuring out what's going on. He went upstairs and saw blood on the floor, y'all, of one of a bedroom where the window was also open. So sad. Patrick then ran outside and found Lindsay lying in the backyard. She had jumped from the window in an attempt to unalive herself after slitting her wrists, y'all. When he asked her where the children were, prosecutors say she told him they were in the basement. Can you believe it? And she knew what was down there in that basement. She knew what he was going to see. She didn't even forewarn this man, y'all. She just sent him down there to see something, the most horrific thing he would ever want to see is his kids lying like that. When he and then Patrick waited with her until EMTs arrived, right? He then ran to the basement where prosecutors say he found the children with exercise bands around their necks. And y'all, they said he was heard screaming, "She killed the kids." And his screams got louder and louder and louder as he discovered each child. Prosecutors allege it was a premeditated crime and that she deliberately sent Patrick out to create the opportunity to unalive the children, y'all. They say she acted with extreme cruelty and was in control of her senses, despite her attorney's claims that she was not. And I have to say, I agree with the prosecutor because of the fact that she literally sent this man on a goose chase to go all these different errands. And he was over here lost trying to figure out what was this prescription she was trying to get. And it was very interesting, y'all. Very interesting. All right, so I'm trying to look for, and I want to find for you the husband's statement, because the husband gives a very heartfelt statement. And I'm going to look his statement up because his statement was very heartfelt. And if people could see such clarity the way he did in describing the emotions, my gosh, we would all be amazing writers. Let me see if I can find it. Patrick Clancy statement. Hopefully it just pops up. Because the husband is being very empathetic to this young lady. He wants everybody to forgive and understand this young lady. So I really admire this man's empathy. Now, even after, when she starts waking up and coming back to her senses, y'all, she starts calling him. She called him repeatedly over time. And he at first wasn't really answering her. And then he finally answered her. And he finally answered her. And she starts trying to make up this lie about her going through a psychosis and that, this devil, this spirit told her to do it. And she heard these voices, and it was just like, y'all, I don't know if I believe her story, y'all. I don't believe her. I think she's lying. I think her attorney put her up to that, because the reason why I don't believe her is, why did she do those searches though? She literally wanted him out of that house for a reason. It was planned. She searched for a restaurant that was far away so she could carry this out, which is the reason why I have a hard time believing that she just randomly, sporadically, while he's gone, all of a sudden she hears his voice says, take out your kids and then take your life too. You're running out of time. I don't know, guys. You be the judge though. Let's hear from the dad. Duxbury tragedy. We read Mr. Patrick Clancy's full statement on his wife, death of 3 kids. So here is this beautiful picture here. These individuals, they're putting like gifts here to memorialize these 3 innocent children. And let's hear from the father. He remained silent in the days following the shocking incident, but then he released a statement speaking publicly for the first time. Okay. In his statement, Patrick Clancy said he had already forgiven his wife. He asked others to do the same, noting that the real Lindsay was loving and caring towards everyone. He also remembered each of his children, saying Cora had an infectious laugh, Dawson's best quality was his pure kindness, and Kaylin was an incredibly happy and vibrant baby. My family was the best thing that ever happened to me. I took so much pride in being Lindsay's husband and a dad to Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin, he wrote. They gave me purpose. I never took it for granted. There is now a massive void where that purpose once was. Now here's his full statement. He released this on January 25th. Let's read it. Patrick Clancy's full statement. Thank you all for your love and support. The warmth I receive from the community is palpable, and your generosity gives me hope that I can focus on some sort of healing. I've seen all of your messages and contributions, including some from people that I haven't seen in over a decade, and many I have never met. I see and appreciate every one of you. Let's see if we can pause this. A lot of people have said that they can't imagine, and they're right. There's absolutely nothing that can prepare you. The shock and pain is excruciating and relentless. I'm constantly reminded of them, and with the little sleep I get. I dream about them on repeat. Any parent knows it's impossible to understand how much you will love your kids until you have them. The same goes for understanding the devastation of losing them. Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin were the essence of my life, and I'm completely lost without them. My family was the best thing that ever happened to me. I took so much pride in being Lindsay's husband and a dad to Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin. I always reminded myself that each day with them was a new gift. Kaylin usually woke up first and would rest his head on my shoulder for a few minutes as he adjusted to the morning. Oh, how sweet. He remembers every little sweet gesture of the kids. This is heartbreaking. Dawson typically sang or spoke his thoughts out loud for a while before we'd go get him. Cora was a big girl, would simply walk downstairs. I can still vividly picture her coming into the living room each morning with her hair a mess, smile on her face. We always started our days together, reading books, cuddling up on the couch, and playing with magnet tiles. I loved taking them places, whether it was scooting at Chandler Elementary, vacations, skiing out on the boat, or to Duxbury Beach, one of our favorite places on earth. They gave me purpose, and I never took it for granted. There is a massive void where the purpose once was. Cora had an infectious laugh and was stunningly beautiful. She was the cautious one. Let's put a picture of her up, this sweet little girl in the middle. She was the cautious one, but it was really beautiful because it was really because she was so caring. She used to say she wanted to be a doctor and a mama when she grew up, and she would practice by giving Kaylin checkups. It was If she was leaving the house to go somewhere, she would pick someone to take care of Carolyn and Charlotte, her baby dolls. She had all the doll accessories available, so her sitters were well equipped. Before she turned 2, she was already wrapping them in perfect swaddles. We would tell her, such a good little mama. She loved all babies, both real and pretend. She loved sloths, unicorns, tea parties, going to lunch with Nana and Grandpa, and giving presents to people. She knew everything about princesses, her favorite being Sophia the First. She truly loved her brothers and us and said it often in her sweet voice. We did a lot of father-daughter activities together, like skiing, visiting San Francisco, or just talking. I loved her, my firstborn, so much. Dawson had beautiful, bold brown eyes that beamed with friendship. He was naturally humorous and generous beyond the norm of a typical toddler, always willing to share his toys with others for all the love he received. He always gave back more. His best quality was pure kindness. He loved trucks, tractors, dinosaurs, Paw Patrol, worker guys, and being outside. He was adventurous and mischievous and enjoyed causing trouble, which he typically found hilarious. He was also remarkably smart. We always said, if we did save enough for retirement, it'll be okay. We'll just live in Dawson's guest house. How sweet. Oh man, this is so sad. He would hug me tighter than most adults, and every night he told me in consistent words at bedtime, without fail, "Good night, Dada. I love you." We had a special bond from day one. He was my buddy and my first boy, and truly a gift. Kaylin was our easygoing child. I always said it was because he was the third child. He had to adapt, and he did easily. He was born with hardly any fuss, was by far our best sleeper. He was just an incredibly happy and vibrant baby, constantly smiling. Our nickname for him was Happy Kaylin. He was sitting on his own, and you could tell he was enjoying his growing independence as he would grab any object within reach. Sometimes he enjoyed my Microsoft calls in the background, playing in his jumpy. I would keep my camera on, too proud to leave it off. He started saying Dada whenever I walked into the room. The last moment we had together was our routine. I would come up from my office at the end of the day and swing him between my legs while he laughed and smiled. If I was ever having a bad day, Kalen always knew how to heal me. Perhaps that's why he held on a little longer. Can you believe the little guys? Can you believe the youngest one of them all, the newborn 8-month-old baby, was the one that held on the longest? What a strong little baby. To spare me whatever pain he could. And as excruciating as it was, I was fortunate and grateful to feel his warmth until his very last moment. Faith is my only hope of believing he felt mine. Oh, so sad. Kalen died with enormous courage despite being so little. Maybe it was his way of demonstrating what I need to do to press forward. I always try to draw inspiration from him. He'll always be my little hero. I want to share some thoughts about Lindsay. She's recently been portrayed largely by people who have never met her, never knew who the real Lindsay was. Our marriage was wonderful and diametrically grew stronger as her condition rapidly worsened. I took as much pride in being her husband as I did in being a father and felt persistently lucky to have her in my life. I still remember the very moment I first laid eyes on her and can recall how overcome I was with the kind of love at first sight you only see in movies. It really didn't take long before I was certain I wanted to marry her. We said, "I love you," to each other multiple times daily, as if it were a reflex. We habitually started every morning with passionate hug, yielding a sigh of relief like we had each received the perfect medicine. If too much time passed away without a hug, she'd look at me and ask, "Did you forget?" We mutually understood the reality that people can have bad days. But we stuck to the rule that when one of us got lost, the other was always there to bring them home. Always. She loved being a nurse. Guys, I find that so ironic that she was a nurse and who was in there giving, helping assist in giving birth to all these babies. This is such an ironic case. To think she's helping give birth to all these kids. She has 3 kids and then she takes her. I don't know. This is a very ironic case, y'all. I gotta say. Okay, very ironic. So she loved being a nurse, but nothing matched her intense love for our kids and dedication to being a mother. It was all she ever wanted. Her passion taught her how to be her passion taught me how to be a better father. I find that interesting, guys, how she wanted to be a mother, but when she became one, and I get, yes, she was going through postpartum depression, but this case is so ironic because she has these 3 kids. She writes in her journal about she wants to have another child, but yet she resents her kids. I understand postpartum can really do a work on people and it can be very traumatic, but this case to me has so many different conflicts in it. It's kind of hard to really comprehend really what was going on. Just saying. I want to ask all of you that you find it deep within yourselves to forgive Lindsay as I have. I'm sorry, right now I can't forgive her. I forgive her spiritually, but I'm side-eyeing her right now. I'm just saying. The real Lindsay was generously loving, caring towards everyone, me, our kids, family, friends, and her patients. The very fibers of her soul are loving. All I wish for her now is that she can somehow find peace. I promise I'll put all my energy into healing and rediscovering my purpose. Man, I feel sorry for this dad, guys. He's going to be traumatized for years. I owe that all to you. Duxbury Fire and Police, our compassionate healthcare workers, our local faith leaders, the Microsoft community, and especially Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin. I don't know how or when I'll be able to do it, but your love and generosity will help me get started. I know that love always wins. Cora, Dawson, and Kaylin, you gave me so much in your short time here. I don't know how. I don't know if the pain will ever go away, but I'll do my best to carry on in your honor. Dada loves you so much and will always remember you with love and endless gratitude. That is a beautiful contribution he did. But this is so sad, man, y'all. What do y'all think about this? I know, like Mama Zach said, he was only gone 20 minutes. You guys, I need to hear, has anybody in the chat dealt with postpartum depression? I love sweet details he gives about each of his children. I hope he actually finds some peace. I know, my God, this is traumatizing, girl. Mama Zach, I don't know. I don't know how he gonna find peace. This is traumatic that he had to come home and see his kids like that. Who wants to see their beautiful children like that? I need to know if anybody in the chat has dealt with postpartum depression. I'm really curious about it because I'm trying to tread on this case very carefully and try to be understanding to both sides. But this one's hard for me to do because, man, I have a hard time covering cases when there's any type of child abuse or taking out, unaliving kids. This is probably like one of the first or second cases I did when it relates to kid cases, because those cases are really, really sad. And I need to know if anybody has dealt with postpartum depression, y'all. Thank you, Deborah Peterson. Love you. She's so sweet. She's watching from Ohio. Oh my gosh, I'm so happy to have you. Welcome, sweetie. Welcome, welcome, welcome. All right, guys. I do want us to hear from the prosecutor, though. And I'm really curious if you guys have dealt with postpartum depression, if you could please shed light on your input, because again, I'm trying to be as empathetic as I can, but I'm having a hard time. Okay. But let's hear from the prosecutor, because I feel like the prosecutor really laid out how, to me, I feel like this was intentional. I really do, because of how the prosecutor laid out the details. It sounds like she knew what she was doing. She strategically asked her husband to leave. And just like Mama Zach said, he was only gone for 20 minutes too, girl. He was gone. Okay, so Mama Zach says, and mom, you're a mom too, because she said Mama Zach. So you're a mom. So she said postpartum is a real thing. A mate of mine went through it. It can be embarrassing and very expensive to get the help for it at all as well. Oh yeah, you're right. I've heard some woman talking about postpartum depression, and she talked about how it was expensive. They were trying to have her do an inpatient treatment, and they were trying to charge her about $30,000 a month because she would have to stay. They wanted to do inpatient. So each night it was like expensive amount of money. I think it was like $1,000 per night or something about that, like over $1,000 per night or something like that. So she was going to end up having to pay about $30,000 a month, which who has that kind of money, y'all? So yeah, like Mama Zach said, they need to make treatment more available for women battling postpartum depression. It needs to be discussed more. I feel like we don't really hear much about it, and it's not emphasized much. It's kind of buried under the rug, and there's not really, I feel like, sufficient treatment for these mothers, and they get turned away. And this seems like a worst case of what happened, because they were giving her all these medications and drugs, and all it did was, to me, cause some type of psychosis to formulate in this woman, to the point where she started having these obsessive thoughts about taking her kids out. But let's hear from this prosecutor, y'all. This prosecutor really laid the facts out really well. And she did a great job. And the prosecutors who really kind of changed my mindset on this case, because at first I was in the middle. I didn't know what to think, you guys. I was like, first of all, I don't like the fact that she took her kids out. So I have a hard time trying to, show empathy for that type of situation. But then I was hearing from some mothers who are dealing with postpartum depression. So I'm trying to be empathetic to that aspect of it, because I've never experienced it. But when, different parents have come out and spoke about it, I thought, maybe I should be empathetic and understand that aspect of it. But when the prosecutor came out and she laid out the facts, y'all, I was like, oh no, hold up, wait a minute. Don't go there, because I'm not with it. I'm not with this lady after I heard what the prosecutor said. So let's hear what she got to say, y'all.
The strength of the Commonwealth case and the potential penalty. On Friday, January 27th, 2023, using an erasable whiteboard because she was still temporarily intubated, one of the first questions that Lindsay Clancy asked was, do I need an attorney? She knew that she had murdered her children, and she had the clarity, focus, and mental acumen to focus on protecting her own rights and interests. The following is a summary of the events that led to the murders of Cora Clancy, Dawson Clancy, and Callan Clancy.
Right. The first strike one I have with this mother is she knew, guys. the legal issues she was facing. She knew that she was facing criminal charges because she knew to ask whether she needed an attorney. That takes some level of rationality. Not someone who's dealing with psychosis or have really lost sight of any form of rationality or recognition of right from wrong, which would be an insanity defense. When you're dealing with an insanity defense, that means you have an inability to identify or recognize right from wrong. Okay. But she knows that she is in a wrong situation, you guys. She knows that because she knew to ask whether she needed an attorney. That's already letting you know this woman was in her right mind. Now, I'm with the defense attorney, y'all, that she was over medicated. That I agree with him, hands down. And I think he's going to have a pretty strong argument during that trial once he lays out the 13 different prescriptions this young lady was on, y'all. 13. Okay, that's way over medicated. But the steps she took in this case, you guys, it really is kind of leaning away from psychosis and leaning towards planned and thought out crime. I don't know. Y'all let me know what y'all think.
On the morning of Tuesday, January 24th, 2023, the defendant took her 5-year-old daughter, Cora, to the pediatrician's for an appointment. She interacted with a receptionist, nursing staff, and a doctor. There were apparently no issues with the defendant's demeanor or behavior as she completed the appointment and was allowed to leave with Cora without any issues or concerns. When she returned home, she went outside with Cora and her 3-year-old son, Dawson, to play in the snow. They built a snowman. The defendant sent photos to her mother and to the defendant, to her husband. She texted with them. Nothing in the text was out of the ordinary or any sign of any distress or trouble. Back inside later that day at 4:02 p.m., the defendant searched on her phone kids' Miralax. She then searched the takeout 3
therapy for. Sorry, y'all. Y'all know how commercials are. They don't want us to be great. But we will get back to it very soon. I still find very disturbing the fact that she did all the searches, but let's keep going.
Matt, she used Apple Maps on her phone to determine how long it would take someone to drive from her home in Duxbury to 3V Restaurant in Plymouth. So she would know how long someone would be gone if they ran that errand.
See right there, strike two. Okay, she already knows about this restaurant. They've been there at least one other time before, right? So you have to ask, what was the necessity for her to search how long it took for him to drive from the house to that restaurant and back? What was the need for that detail if they had ate there before? In my opinion, it was because this woman was thinking about taking those kids' life and trying to figure out how long she can get him out of that house while she could carry out these crimes, which mean it was, in my opinion, intentional and planned.
She next went on the CVS website at 4:47 p.m. and then called CVS on Summer Street in Kingston. She spoke to the manager of CVS and asked if they had the kids' Miralax. The manager told her no, but they had other similar medications. According to the manager of CVS, her voice did not sound slurred or impaired in any way. She had no trouble understanding the defendant, and it was a perfectly normal conversation. At 4:53,
which in my opinion shows rationality. This woman was able to communicate clearly and rationally with the pharmacist. She knew how to identify and ask for the specific medication that she needed. And she knew the exact one she needed. And she told the pharmacist that. She knew the exact pharmacist to call and the one that her husband was going to go to. And she was able to Google the restaurant that she wanted and speak to the restaurant clerk. All of these steps she took shows this woman was in her right mind and knew exactly what she was doing. She knew right from wrong. So I understand that postpartum depression is a very horrific situation that women go through, guys. It's very terrible. I've heard of women just so depressed, crying, feeling hopelessness, wanting to take their life. I understand. But this woman, she went beyond that, guys. This woman thought about this and she knew what she was doing and she planned it out. And even after the fact, she was asking for an attorney. This woman knows exactly what she did. And she wanted to kill those kids because she wanted them to die right along with her because she was feeling this sense of hopelessness and wanted to take those kids with her. But her attempt on her life ended up being a failure. So her plan didn't go the way she wanted it to go. She tried so many ways to take her life. She tried to cut her wrist. That didn't work. She tried to jump out the window. That didn't work. So it's like everything she tried, it failed. It was like God wanted her to be alive to face the fire for what she had intentionally, in my humble opinion, did. Allegedly.
3 p.m., the defendant texted her husband, who was working in his home office in their basement. She texted, "Any chance you want to do takeout from 3V? I didn't cook anything. It's been a long day." This was an unusual request, as when the family ordered takeout, they'd usually go somewhere closer to home, but it was a place that they had been in the past. Patrick Clancy texted back, "Yes."
Did you hear that? So for the husband, he said the location of this restaurant was unusual given the distance. You know, there's all these different restaurants near the house, like within driving distance, y'all. 1 or 2 minutes away. They right around the corner. But for some reason, she did this Google to find out where's this restaurant, how long it takes to get to this restaurant, and how many minutes that she has to carry out this crime. She calculated the whole thing out. And he already was feeling weird about it because he was like, wait, his mind was like, he even told the officer, she's like, this is kind of weird because this restaurant is farther than all these other restaurants right next to us. We could easily go there. But she wants to go to this restaurant. But see, this man felt absolute deep love for this woman. And you can tell by his letter that he wrote that he really is deeply in love with this woman. And I feel he would do anything. He would go to the moon and back for her. So even though he felt the request was weird because he could have gone to any restaurant, he was like, okay, he just overlooked it. He didn't think much of it until after the fact. When he got home, he realized that's why she wanted me to go so far, because she had this all planned out, y'all. Let's keep going.
Yes. And then the defendant asked him to check the menu. At 5:06 p.m., the husband texted the defendant asking what she was going to get. She responded, "A Mediterranean power bowl." She spelled it correctly, and it was something that was on the menu. He then told...
And notice how this prosecutor is laying out every detail. She says that she spelled it correctly and was able to identify it on the menu, all that stuff. This is going towards premeditation. Because the defense is saying this woman was dealing with psychosis. She couldn't understand what's going on. She couldn't really recognize what she was doing. She was possessed, all these things. But the prosecutor is laying out every detail, and she's trying to lay out the fact that this woman knew what she was doing. She was able to correctly spell what she wanted. She was able to correctly identify what she wanted. She was able to communicate that. She was able to understand and comprehend the very order that her husband wanted and communicate that clearly, rationally, and in a reasonable manner. This prosecutor is laying out for the judge every detail to demonstrate the premeditation that was going on in this case to me, which is why I think it's different than your average postpartum. I mean, I was with the postpartum until I heard this prosecutor, y'all. The prosecutor had me think a whole different way about the woman, y'all. I really think there was some careful thought about this.
Told her that he wanted the scallop and pork belly risotto. At 5:10 p.m., the defendant called 3V Restaurant to place the order. She got the order correct. She gave the correct name for pickup, Patrick. The hostess who took the call said there was nothing out of the ordinary about this call. She was able to understand the defendant, that her voice was not slurred or impaired in any way.
Now, the prosecutor is highlighting the fact that this woman's Lindsay's voice was not slurred or impaired in any way, to show that she wasn't so under the influence of the medication that she was taking that it totally just consumed her cognitive abilities. No, she was very sober, very rational, and was able to speak clearly and articulate her request to the individual taking her order.
At 5:15 p.m., Patrick Clancy headed out the door to run these errands at the defendant's request. As he left, she texted him Pedialyte liquid stool softener. Surveillance footage shows Mr. Clancy at CVS on Summer Street in Kingston at 5:32 p.m. He goes to the medication aisle, the children's medication aisle. Phone records show that he called the defendant at 5:33 p.m. and she did not answer the phone. He then calls him back at 5:34 p.m. and the call lasted 14 seconds. He's there at the store unsure of which medication to get, and she tells him exactly what she wants. He had no issues communicating with her. It was a completely normal call, although he did mention that she seemed like she was in the middle of something. He is on surveillance footage during this time, exiting that aisle and appeared to be using his phone. He then heads to the register, makes his purchase, and leaves the store at 5:37 p.m. He's next seen on footage at 3V Restaurant at 5:54 p.m. He picks up the food and he's out of there within a minute. When he arrives home, the first thing he noticed was the silence. He did not see or hear the defendant or the children. He actually called her cell phone at 6:09 p.m. looking for them, and she did not answer. He went to their bedroom on the second floor and the door was locked. He was able to open it, and when he looked inside, he saw blood on the floor in front of a full-length mirror and the window open. He immediately runs.
'Tis the season for non-drowsy symptom relief from over 200 indoor and outdoor allergens, day after day.
Sorry, guys. We're back to the annoying, obnoxious commercials, y'all. But as you can see, these details she's laying out are very disturbing. It shows the premeditation. It shows the thought process. It shows she wanted this to happen, guys. As sad as it is. Let's keep going. And we're going to hear from her defense attorney, because I told you I think that defense attorney is very skillful, and it's going to be a very interesting trial.
Backyard, where he finds the defendant laying on the ground. She appeared to have cuts on her wrists and neck, but he stated to 911 that those wounds were no longer bleeding. She was conscious. He called 911. During this time, he asked the defendant, "What did you do?" She responded to him, "I tried to kill myself and jumped out the window." During the 911 call, Patrick can be heard asking the defendant, "Where are the kids?" He later told police that she replied, "In the basement." So immediately after this happened, she knew what she had done and she knew where the kids were. When EMS arrived, he asked them to stay with her so he could go find his kids. The 911 call kept going. Patrick can be heard on the 911 call entering the home and heading to the basement. At one point, he calls out, "Guys." He can then be heard screaming in agony and shock as he found his children. His screams seem to get louder and more agonized as the time passes. Cora and Callan were on the floor in the den area of the finished basement, which is to the left when you walk down the stairs, while Dawson was alone on the floor in his father's home office, which is to the right when you go down the stairs. Each child still had the exercise band that was used to strangle them tied around their necks when their father found them. Dawson and Callan were face down on the floor. Cora was on her side with her torso turned towards the floor. He removed the bands and begged them to breathe. He continued to scream uncontrollably and screamed for officers to come to the basement. The dispatchers are hearing this and they send help down to the basement. And when they encounter Patrick, he yells out, "She killed the kids."
Can you imagine what this father had to see, man, when this happened? This father, is never going to be the same. This is so sad. No parent should have to go through this. And the sad part is, y'all, while this prosecutor is reading all these very, very disturbing, sad details, look at this woman's face. This is Lindsay here laying in the hospital as she's being arraigned for the charges, and she has absolutely no remorse on this woman's face. A blank stare. You would think after this happened, she would reflect on what she did and she would feel remorse. Her face is dry as bones, y'all. You don't see one tear as she's talking about this. Now, Mama Zach, you bring up a good point. We're going to hear from her defense attorney. I don't think this is a slam dunk case, in my opinion. I think the prosecutor is very persuasive in her arguments. I think she stands a very strong chance. Okay, she does. She has a strong case. She does. But at the same time, the defense attorney has a strong case too, because this young lady was under the influence of 13 different drugs, allegedly. Okay. He's going to bring in expert witnesses to show this woman was dealing with psychosis and all kinds of thoughts. There could be a possibility. It depends now. It's going to depend on jury selection. That is where the prosecution or the defense will win or lose the case. It depends who gets on the jury, who wins. Because, like I said, the defense also has a strong case related to the fact that this young lady was under the influence she was sedated with way too much drugs, which I'm pretty sure they're going to have an expert witness come in and talk about what kind of psychosis or irrationality this woman could have been experiencing because of all the different drugs she was on, and how possibly these doctors committed malpractice by prescribing this woman with all these drugs that she was over sedated. The defense attorney is already letting you know during the press conferences that he's already spoke about his defense, and he has a pretty solid defense. So this case could go either way depending on jury selection. It's going to really come down to either one of these sides can win this case. This case can easily be won by the prosecution because she has a strong case, y'all. She has a strong likelihood of winning if she's really solid in her jury selection. If she can find jurors that will follow the law, she could win. But if there's some jurors on there that have that empathy heart factor and they've dealt with postpartum and they're dealing with all this, they understand. And then they're going to have the expert testimony from the expert witnesses coming in that's going to talk about how these drugs could have psychologically impaired this woman's rational thinking. But I think what's going to really win the day is the planning. That's going to win the day. And I think if we have a good jury here, and if the prosecution's good enough to pick the right jury, she could win, because when she lays out the details of how this woman literally searched how far the restaurant was and did all these different steps to get him to leave the house, knowing how he normally stays in the house, those different steps she took could really, really, really convince a jury that she's guilty. But like I said, the defense still has a strong case. So this case can go either way. It's not a slam dunk for the prosecution. I don't feel it is. I feel it's going to come down to jury selection. If she's good at what she does and she picks the right jury and she can educate the jury before she selects them to let them know the law and what they're looking at here, she has a strong chance. But that defense attorney, I'm telling you, let's hear from him. He has a pretty strong defense too. We're going to move on to hear from him. And I think he's pretty persuasive too. And that's why I don't think this is a slam dunk for the defense. Not at all. Not at all, y'all. It's going to be battle of the experts, in my opinion. Battle of experts' opinions.
And then she strangled each child in the place where they should have felt the safest, at home with their mom. She did so with deliberate premeditation and extreme atrocity and cruelty. And to supplement what the defense counsel has provided, I have a statement. I feel like I need to file with the court.
Are you sick of having issues with your webinar?
Sorry guys, these annoying commercials again. I'm trying to get past this prosecutor. I want to hear from the defense now.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much. Attorney Reddington.
Thank you very much, Your Honor.
Your Honor, my request is that the court not enter what I would suggest is an inhumane order, ordering this woman to be incarcerated. We all know.
The first skill that this defense attorney has is he pulls at the heartstrings of the judge. He uses key words like inhumane, shock the conscience. Notice the words this man uses. He's strategically using these type of words that's going to try to pull at the heartstrings of the judge. Now, I admit it's not going to work for the judge, but you take these same very heart-pulling, heart-triggering words and you put it in front of a panel of jurors who don't have that legal objective skill that, you know, a judge would have or an attorney would have. And the words that this defense attorney uses can easily sway a jury, y'all.
No, as people that work in the system, that jails and prisons are woefully deficient in medical care of the most basic type. We all know that this is an individual, as Rhonda knows from Dr. Ricard's letter, who is in dire medical condition. We all know that this woman is, as counsel concedes apparently, a danger to herself. I question whether she would ever make it to a trial. She's suicidal. She's extremely emotional. However, she's unable and has been unable to express any happiness or sadness or cry. And in fact, sometime about a month or two ago, she made the comment, "I just wish that I could feel something." Now, our society fails miserably in treating women with postpartum depression or even postpartum psychosis. It's medicate, medicate, medicate. Throw the pills at you and then see how it works. If it doesn't work, increase the dose or decrease the dose. Then end up trying another combination of medications. We're talking a relatively short period of time from when that baby was born in October up until January, when this incident occurred, Your Honor, that she was on such significant dosage of medication. Your Honor knows that Cora was born in 2017. It was a very uneventful, normal pregnancy and delivery. No issues afterwards as far as anxiety. Dawson was born in 2018. Again, it was a normal birth. She had no significant issues as far as anxiety. She did have to have stitches and she was sore, and that was about it. Then, of course, Callan was born. When Callan was born, she ended up becoming depressed, suffered from significant anxiety, as a result of which she consulted with a number of doctors. A number of doctors indicated that she would be able to sleep, she would be able to feel, she would be able to emote once these medications kicked in. And again, as I say, our medical in our society completely abandons women with this condition. It's easy to say, come on, you have a healthy baby. You have a wonderful husband. You're able to take care of your kids in your home. You're lucky. Take the pills, you'll be okay. Well, they put her on a number of medications. They put her on Prozac, which Your Honor is well aware, is what's known as SSRI, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor. Your Honor knows that along with some of these medications, they have the black box warning from the FDA, may cause suicidal ideation, may cause homicidal ideation. She was on Ativan. She was on Benadryl. And then she ended up being told, okay, because she was complaining about the effects of the Prozac, they said, stop the Prozac, we'll find something else. They put her on Remeron.
Get live tax expert help free, plus a final review.
Now we're waiting for the commercials to go off now, but you've heard some of the argument from the defense just now. And I want you to be the judge to let me know, who do you think is convincing right now? We heard from the prosecution so far. We heard from the defense. Who are you siding with? Because I got to be honest with you. That defense attorney is pulling all kinds of ways at my heartstring right now. At first, I was so for the prosecution, y'all. I was ready to go to convict, convict, and convict. But I told you, this defense attorney is very good with his words. He's very good with educating the judge about postpartum depression, which a lot of people don't really understand the severity of it. But he's very good at laying out the facts. He's good at laying out the type of drugs she was under the influence of. He's good at laying out the fact that she's struggling with trying to even feel emotion. This man, I'm telling you, he's very skillful at what he does. And I feel as though this judge wanted so badly to side with that defense attorney, but his hands were tied. And he had no choice but to deny bail in this case, given the facts or the allegations involved. But I'm telling you, when I heard the judge speak, the judge really wanted to side with that defense attorney. I'm telling you, he wanted so bad to let that girl be released. Okay. But that's what I'm telling you. That's the issue. Is I don't think this is a slam dunk, even though the prosecution has solid case. She has a great argument. She's got the fact, but this case can either go either way. It's not a slam dunk. So I think for this one, we're going to have to just wait and see. Even with the details the prosecution lays out, there's still a whole different side that the jury can easily go with on this case, y'all. So let's keep hearing from the defense here. He is amazing, y'all.
Seroquel. And Your Honor, I attached from David Benjamin, the toxicologist, some papers with the submission. And Your Honor can see the side effects that this Seroquel causes. She was having bad thoughts. She was having worsening depression. Her husband suffered through that phase. Her parents were well aware of the fact that she was suffering from this depression and depressive phase. She wasn't sleeping. She ended up at some point, Your Honor, December 31st.
One key thing that just stood out when he said is she wasn't sleeping. Remember when we talked at the very beginning of the live, we talked about the symptoms of postpartum depression. And one of those symptoms are insomnia, inability to sleep. So it appears as though she was experiencing some symptoms consistent with postpartum depression and her inability to sleep. So like I said, guys, this case, I don't know. This case can go either way.
She was on Seroquel. They told her then the Valium would be stopped. She was a shell of herself, no personality, and went to the doctor again. The doctor again prescribes the Seroquel, and then they took her off the Seroquel. And then she went to the doctor, and at that point, they prescribed trazodone, Ativan, amitriptyline, right up to the very end, when she was so bad that she voluntarily turned herself in, if you will, to the McLean Hospital. We know that that's a psychiatric hospital. She was at the McLean Hospital for a period of about 5 days. While at the McLean Hospital, they basically tried to get her off the Seroquel. She wanted to get off the benzodiazepines. She felt that she was being addicted to the benzodiazepines. She then ends up on trazodone, Ativan. Her mood was terrible after she got out of McLean Hospital. She still had the suicidal thoughts. As the government has indicated, she even told her husband that she had suicidal thoughts. You think this is something that she's planning to kill these 3 kids by going and getting a menu, going on to Google Maps or whatever it is, and finding out the distance? When she tells her husband she's having suicidal thoughts, probably a month prior, thoughts of hurting her children, they go to the doctor again, and she's on the medications, on and off, on and off. This is a significant issue between the postpartum depression as well as possibility of postpartum psychosis.
Bam, right there. That is exactly where the defense is going to go with this argument. He is going to go with the argument that this woman had been experiencing ongoing postpartum psychosis and also even psychosis related to taking all these different drugs and the effects of those drugs, and when you mix them together and how they can cause and exacerbate thoughts of suicide or self-conclusion and psychosis, y'all. I am telling you, that defense attorney is laying out a very solid defense. And if a jury believes it, and he's going to have experts, that are going to come in, y'all. This woman can easily walk. I'm just saying. I don't know what the jury's going to do, like I said, because both sides are very solid. But you see how he was able to literally take those allegations that the prosecution said and flip it around to show, in his opinion, that this was a form of psychosis, not some deliberate planning. So like I said, y'all, I don't think for any means that this is a slam dunk case. It is not. And that defense attorney, I'm telling you, he's really good at what he does. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. This goes on forever. Y'all will have to hear that hearing. I'll actually leave a link. I'll find the link. And I will.
Claritin relieves symptoms from over 200 in.
Sorry, guys, about that. I will leave a link for the hearing, the whole entire hearing, in my description box so you can watch the whole thing, because we're not going to sit here and watch the whole thing. But I do want to play this last part from the judge, because I want y'all to hear from the judge, because the judge acknowledges that both attorneys in this case are really good at what they do. And you can tell this is going to be a very intense trial that can honestly go either way. And most times when you have a prosecution and involved in a case, a criminal case, usually you can really decipher who has the strongest case. And you're like, man, slam dunk, the prosecution's gonna win this, or slam dunk, this is a reasonable doubt, whatever. This case, not so much. It could easily go either way. So we're gonna hear from the judge after we hear this little bits and pieces left from the defense.
And that's not fair or correct. Unfortunately, in the Shattuck Hospital, to suggest that she can get, quote, what she needs from the Shattuck Hospital is absolutely not true. The care that she's receiving at the hospital she's at now and the care that she would be receiving at the Spalding Rehab are light years ahead of the dismal, dank conditions of the Shattuck Hospital that we put our prisoners in. It's like something out of Iran, and that's not fair or correct.
Thank you both of you, all of you who appeared before me that will be litigating this case are all very well respected. And I'm sure at some point in time in Superior Court, this case will be tried in a very professional and very well by both sides. As counsel stated in Commonwealth v. Vasquez, the Supreme Judicial Court addressed the issue of bail in first-degree murder cases, and Justice Lowy issued a detailed decision about the issues in these types of cases. The court found that a defendant charged with first-degree murder has no right to bail, but may be admitted to bail in the discretion of the judge. The court ruled that a judge should consider the nature and circumstances of the offense and weigh the defendant's risk of flight in light of the strength or weaknesses of the Commonwealth's case and the potential penalty of a sentence to life in prison. The court further noted that appropriate considerations for a judge would include the defendant's family ties, financial resources, length of residence in the community, character, mental condition, record of conviction, appearances at court proceedings, or any previous flight to avoid prosecution or failure to appear at any court proceeding. It is important to note that the purpose of bail is not to impose punishment. The court has conducted a careful review of the details of the case and the defendant's history. The court's reviewed the filings that have been made, as well as letters submitted by counsel for the defendant and the update that was received from her attending trauma surgeon. The factual allegations in this case are both horrific and tragic. The potential penalty faced by the defendant, if convicted, is severe. The defendant has no criminal history. She does not even have a driving record. There is no evidence of any history of any abusive behavior by the defendant. The defendant was.
I really had to stop and address that because a lot of people just think that individuals who have criminal records are prone to violence or very heinous crime like this. But the reality is, none of us are immune to these type of crimes. Any person is prone to commit a heinous act like this. I know it sounds very disturbing to say that, but you could see from an example here, this woman didn't even have a driving record. Her record was pristine, crystal clear. And you would have to ask yourself, well, then what would lead this woman who has absolutely no criminal record to commit this heinous crime to take her life? There had to have been something that happened psychologically to this woman that led her to this path. No criminal record? I think that's something to really take into consideration, that she was dealing with some form of psychosis, but whether that level of psychosis was enough to overcome her moral compass. That is the huge question you have to ask. Did she recognize right and wrong from what she was doing? And did she go ahead and proceed knowing that what she was doing was wrong? And given her behavior, y'all, that is going to be up for the jury. And I just feel as though this is going to be difficult. And like Mama Zach says, she said here, I like Mama Zach's opinion. Mama Zach says, yes, he's a good defense attorney, but if they can prove premeditation, she wanted to do it while the husband was gone, would it indicate she knew it was wrong and insanity plea might be out? I don't think she's going to be able to win insanity defense, guys. I don't think so, Mama Zach. I don't think she's going to be able to win insanity defense. I don't, because of given some of the allegations here. She knew right from wrong. She knew enough to even ask for an attorney, which again, let me emphasize, the prosecution cannot bring up whether a defendant has invoked their constitutional rights to an attorney, to remain silent. That is an automatic mistrial. So the prosecution is not going to be able to bring that up in front of a jury. Okay. But she could bring up other things like, her doing the Google searches, searching how far the location was. So you're right, Mama Zach. Like I said, the prosecution has a strong case, but like I said, it comes down to jury selection. That was really what I was saying. I wasn't saying the legal issues. I really don't think she has an insanity defense. We'll even look up a little bit of insanity before we close out the live to look at the insanity defense, because you have to really prove that this person did not recognize right or wrong. And she knew what she was doing. Allegedly. Well, the prosecution is going to have to show that she knew right from wrong. Do we have enough information to recognize she knew right from wrong? She has journal entries addressing that she knew right from wrong, that she knew that it was wrong for her to feel these feelings about her kids. She's even said in her writings that, I shouldn't feel this way. I want to feel love for my kids and I don't. Like, she knows right from wrong. And she knew these feelings weren't right. So I don't think she has an insanity defense. I don't. My issue is the jury. That's what I was trying to get at. I'm trying to be as clear as I can. I'm saying the issue is going to come down to jury selection. Who they put on that jury is going to be the issue. It's not really the legal issues. It's the jury. Whether the jury can follow the law. Because like I said this defense attorney is really good. He's able to use these very emotional, triggering words that can pull at the heartstrings of a layperson who doesn't have the objective legal skills to really look at the legal aspect of it. If they pick the wrong individual on that panel, it can easily be a mistrial, because the person, if they pick a wrong person or they pick wrong people on the panel, meaning the prosecution doesn't strategically pick the right people that are going to willing to objectively follow the law and not be moved or overly consumed by their emotions. Instead of following the law, they just deviate from that and say, oh my God, I feel this empathy because I had postpartum before and I felt depression. And so I feel for her. So I'm going to find not guilty. That's my issue. My issue is with the jury selection, guys. That's the issue I'm having. And I said that, like I said, the judge, he's able to overcome the persuasion of that defense attorney because he's looking at it from an objective. His hands are tied. He has to follow the law. He has to follow by the book. You could see how he's reading the law word from word as he's about to give his decision because he's looking at it from an objective. But when you have a jury who's coming from the human aspect of it, and if the prosecution does not strategically pick the right people on that panel, she could easily lose the case. That's what I'm saying. I don't think, personally, if we're looking at it from a legal perspective, I don't think that the defense attorney has an insanity case. I don't. This woman knew exactly right from wrong based upon what the prosecution laid out. My issues with the jury, whether or not this prosecution is skilled enough to identify the wrong bad seed apples that could possibly slip and be on that panel that will be moved by their emotions instead of following the law that they're presented with. Because if they follow the law, this case should be a conviction. It should be guilty. That's what it should be. But I'm in the middle of being unable to make a decision because it's going to come down to jury selection. Cases are won and lost, especially a case as difficult as this, based upon jury selection. And my prior experience as a prosecutor, there'd be these cases like this that have these very tough, intricate information and details that can pull at the heartstrings of individuals that can, if you pick the wrong person who's going to go against the law that the judge gives them, and they're just going to go rogue and just say, oh, my emotions is I'm going to go with the defense because I feel empathy for that person instead of I'm going to follow the law. I'm going to ignore my emotions and I'm going to look at the law. So there's certain cases where you really need to focus on the jury selection aspect because that's where you can win or lose the case. That's where the attorney can win or lose the case. And in this particular case, my opinion is that this case is going to be won or lost at jury selection. This is that type of case where it could go either way based upon who is put on that jury. That's what I'm saying. That's what I'm saying, Mama Zach. That I think the prosecution has a solid case, but that doesn't matter. What matters is right now in this case is who is on that jury. Because if their emotions if they're overconsumed by their emotions and they ignore the law that they're given, the jury instructions, this case can easily be a mistrial. At the end of the day, if the prosecutor picks the right jury and she educates the jury about the law and finds out who she needs to kick off that jury during the selection process that may not be able to follow the law and they're going to go against the law and basically just go, make a decision based on their emotions and not the law. If she can really make sure the right people are on the jury, she easily wins the case, even with how good that attorney is. And he's very good. But those words he uses, those emotional triggering words, plus he's going to have expert testimony. But at the end of the day, I think with the information the prosecutor has, it's not going to be enough to, in my opinion, overcome an insanity plea or an insanity defense. But again, if a juror's on there and they see differently and they go against what the law says or they don't understand the law, they'll easily go with, oh, she didn't understand. You know what I mean? Right. Mama Zach says, I hate to be the person who has to pick juror members, talk about both pressure and faith. It is, Mama Zach. It is difficult, girl. Oh, my goodness. Oh, my goodness. I know when I would prepare for my trials as a criminal prosecutor, I would spend most of my time when I'm preparing for the trial to really, really think of all the different questions that I need to ask those potential jurors and also formulate questions where I can educate the jury about the law at the same time and some of the intricate facts that could throw off the jury during that jury selection to see how they respond. And I tell you, one of my most difficult aspects of preparing for a trial is definitely the jury selection preparation. It's difficult because any prosecutor will tell you, you can win or lose a case during the jury selection process. It's that vital. It is that vital. You get that one person on that panel and that you picked wrong and it was an oversight for some reason, and your whole case is done, even if you had the strongest case, it's really won or lost. That's the best prosecutors are the ones that are able to skillfully pick that jury. Those are the more skillful attorneys. So that's why I'm saying this is definitely one of those cases where it's going to come down to jury selection, in my opinion. It's going to definitely come down. It's not, like I said, if I just looked at the law, yeah, prosecutor wins all day. But there's a whole different ballgame when you have a jury. Because they're not lawyers. You're not having lawyers coming in here in this case. You're not having judges coming in. You're coming in and these are people from all different walks of life who don't understand the intricacies of the law or, all that stuff. They're just thinking from their personal life experiences when they come in. And that's that humanity aspect. And this case has a significant amount of humanity aspect and empathy, and women who have experienced postpartum that are going to be on that are going to be potential jurors who are going to feel all the empathy for this mother. And that can cause them to be distracted by their emotions and lead them down a path of following their emotions instead of following the law. So y'all, that's what I'm saying. This case can go either way. As disturbing as it is, it's not a slam dunk. Although legally it could be if it was a bench trial. If it was a bench trial where it's just the jury, the judges, there's no jury and it's the judges hearing the case all day long, the prosecution has a strong case. I don't care how amazing that defense attorney is, but he has some strong defenses, guys. He's going to have a whole list of prescription drugs she was on. He's going to bring in an expert who's going to talk about how it could cause a state of psychosis, which is what his whole defense is going to be hinged on trying to establish. And like I said, if you got a juror that thinks, they agree with that and they go down that path and said, oh, I was on that medication before, and they start personalizing it, and you're not supposed to personalize it as a juror. But again, if you have a juror or a couple jurors that go rogue and disregard what the judge says about the law, and they're like, oh, whatever, I've had those prescription drugs before and it caused me to experience psychosis, so I'm with the defendant on this one, not guilty. Now we got a hung jury. So, or you can have a jury that feels empathy for her. Instead of, convicting her of murder, they go with manslaughter. They're like, oh, well, maybe she did experience some sense of loss of rationality. Let's just give her manslaughter. Like, they just disregard the law again, like I said. So let's hear what the judge finished. Let's hear him again, and we'll hear a little bit about the insanity, the offense.
Was raised in New England and has extensive ties to the local area. She has an extremely supportive family. She had worked for several years in a local hospital, and a number of co-workers have written letters in support of the defendant and her character. She's described in these letters as an exemplary worker, colleague, and friend.
This can't be right.
I'm really trying to get to this judge's ruling, but he is taking way too long.
Trouble with your taxes.
Hold on, guys. Sorry about that. I'm still trying to get out of this ad. You know how the ads can be forever. Let's see what he still has to say.
With counseling. In the event that the defendant were to complete the services at a 24/7 rehab and complete that care at the appropriate time in the future. If the defendant were in a position that she was going to be discharged to a residential setting, both sides would have the opportunity to be heard further. Any discharge in order to remain in that facility, local hospital, and a number of co-workers have written letters in support of the defendant and her character. She's described in these letters as an exemplary worker to be moved to a new facility.
I honestly thought he was going to get to the point, y'all, but he going to be here all night. But basically, ultimately, what the judge decided was deny bond at this time. Okay. That was the summary of what he was trying to get to, y'all. So he eventually denied it, even though, you know, I'm telling you, that defense attorney is good. It's not going to be a slam dunk. It's not going to be a slam dunk case. But let's just kind of talk about the insanity defense definition so y'all can hear a little bit more about the legal aspect of it, because that's really going to be something she's going to try to go into, trying to argue that she was experiencing some type of psychosis that because of all the drugs she was under the influence of and that she was prescribed, and postpartum depression that she was dealing with. But basically, there's few states that don't even allow. Did you guys know that? Some states don't allow it, like Idaho, Kansas, Montana, Utah. They don't allow the insanity defense, which is quite interesting. Now, how courts test for legal insanity? Depending on the jurisdiction, courts use one of the combination of the following tests for legal insanity. The McNaughton rule is defendant either did not understand what he or she did, or they failed to distinguish right from wrong because of a disease of the mind. That is something that, you know, her defense attorney could argue that she had a disease of the mind that was contributed due to all these drugs that she was prescribed, and she was taking all these different drugs that caused her to not really recognize right from wrong. But again, that can easily be refuted by the fact that she went and Google searched, you know, the medication that she needed for her child, the Miralax. Plus, she was able to Google search the restaurant she wanted to go to, Google search how far it was, how long it would take to come back. Also, she was able to rationally and clearly speak to the restaurant and order and correctly spell out the items she wanted. So that can go against the McNaughton rule defense of right from wrong. You can easily, right? The irresistible impulse test is, as a result of a mental disease, defendant was unable to control his impulses, which led to a criminal act. She could easily try to argue that she, because of these drugs, her impulses were too all consuming to her. They were all consuming, and she couldn't control the impulses in her because of this mental disease, this psychosis. The Durham rule, regardless of clinical diagnosis, defendant's mental defect resulted in a criminal act. That's another one, the mental defect of the drugs that she was sedated with, and constantly all these over drugged and sedated. There's a strong defense that she has. That one, the mental defect might be one, the Durham rule, she might go for that. The model penal code, the test for legal insanity. Because of a diagnosed mental defect, defendant either failed to understand the criminality of his acts or unable to act within the confines of the law. Okay, understand the criminality of the facts of his acts. So again, if she's saying she's hearing voices telling her to do this and she's running out of time, she might be saying, I'm answering to some higher power. She's already trying to build this psychosis defense. She called her husband up in the hospital and told him that she heard a voice telling her to do these acts and that she was running out of time. So like I said, I really can see them going with an insanity defense. Really can see that. And it seems like she could, you know, like she said, she's going to be saying she's hearing voices. And you know, telling her what to do. And she had this temporary state of psychosis and insanity and didn't understand. So y'all. Okay. Now, we're going to talk about a little bit how it works in Massachusetts too, after we get into that. But a few states, like I was telling y'all, they don't allow criminal charges. They don't allow insanity defense against criminal charges such as Idaho, Kansas, Montana, and Utah. All four of these states, with the exception of Kansas, allow guilty but insane verdicts, which often provide the institutionalization in lieu of prison. Most states that recognize legal insanity use either the McNaughton rule, sometimes in combination with the irresistible impulse rule, or the model penal code. Only New Hampshire uses the Durham standard. So as I mentioned, these standards here, they really relate to whatever jurisdiction you're in. Not all the jurisdictions use all these different tests that we just went over. It depends where you're located, which one of these or a combination of what jurisdiction will use. Okay. So it's just going to depend on what's going on in Massachusetts and what type of defense they're going to go with over there in Massachusetts. Let's take a look at that, though, how the insanity defense works in Massachusetts. According to the law, all people are presumed to be sane in Massachusetts, which means that the law assumes defendant is sane until that defendant can prove that they are not. Now, you notice normally in criminal prosecutions, the defendant doesn't have to prove anything. The defendant can just sit there all day, eat, drink their coffee, watch it all unfold, and it's the prosecution that has the burden. But once the defense brings up a defense of insanity, that burden then shifts where they're going to have to prove that they are not insane. That means the defendant bears the burden of proving their insanity, which they must prove with clear and convincing evidence. And that's a lower standard than the prosecution. The prosecution has to prove the highest standard in the United States, which is beyond a reasonable doubt. But when the defense is proving an insanity claim, they only have to prove it by clear and convincing evidence. That's nothing, okay? That's a low standard, y'all. Very low basic standard, okay? But successfully proving insanity can be very difficult, which is why I told you, even though they're going to argue it and they have a pretty strong argument, it's not enough to really prove it, in my opinion. I'm saying, but like I said, it's going to come down to that jury. It's going to come down to who they pick to put on that panel is going to make or break the case, in my opinion. First, a defendant must show that the insanity existed at the time the crime occurred. And this is what they have to prove in Massachusetts. Insanity only needs to exist at the time of the crime, so it is possible for a defendant to claim temporary insanity. And I think that's really where she's going with this, because when she called her husband up, she was saying that she heard this voice that just randomly came out of nowhere. So she's going to say she felt this temporary psychosis come upon her out of nowhere when she was just with the kids. All of a sudden, this voice out of nowhere just temporarily consumes her and tells her she has to carry out this mission and she's running out of time. I think she's going to go with that. Or that they were insane only for a short duration. That's all she has to prove, guys. She just has to prove that she was insane at a short duration. Even if a defendant is found competent and sane in court, they may be able to mount an insanity defense based on their mental capacity at the time of the crime. Like I was saying, because like the prosecution saying, oh, she was so sane when she was talking to the restaurant, when she did the Google searches, when she was trying to figure out how far the restaurant was. She was saying that whole time. You remember how the prosecution laid out those details really clear? Well, that doesn't matter if Lindsay is saying that she had this temporary psychosis that just randomly fell upon her at the time she committed the crimes, that she was fine during the day. She was fine when she planned out this going to eat out and wanted to get this food. And then all of a sudden, this temporary psychosis fell upon her at the time she committed the acts, that it just sporadically happened to her out of nowhere. That's what she's going to argue, guys. That's where that part in the argument is where the prosecution is going to have a difficult time trying to prove that part, because you saw how great she was showing before the crime, but at the time of the crime where Lindsay's claiming that she felt this temporary psychosis is really where that defense is going to come in. And I'm telling you guys, that is where the defense could easily win this case. Yeah, easily based on that small little window at the time of the crime, that she experienced this short duration of psychosis, this temporary insanity, that sprung about from the combinations of drugs she was sedated with, in addition to the postpartum psychosis. And there's going to be battle of the experts coming in. It's going to be a very, very contentious trial. Even if a defendant is found competent and sane in court, they may be able to mount an insanity defense based on their mental capacity at the time of the crime. That's going to be the biggest issue in this case. Second, a defendant must show that due to insanity, they either, one, were not able to understand the consequences of their actions, or two, understood the consequences of their actions, but were not able to tell that what they were doing was wrong. And what she's going to say is, I didn't know what I was doing was wrong. The voice was telling me that this was urgent, that to save my kids, I had to kill them, to save them because they were in danger and I was running out of time. I thought I was saving my babies by killing them and bringing them to heaven with me. Y'all, I'm telling you, that's what she gonna say. I'm telling you, my opinion. Not only must a defendant prove all the elements above, they must do so by clear and convincing evidence, a high standard to meet. Clear and convincing evidence is higher than a preponderance of evidence, and it is, but it's not higher than a beyond a reasonable doubt. And clear and convincing evidence is a standard used in civil cases. So it is a higher step above preponderance, but again, it's not higher than beyond a reasonable doubt. So if you compare the two standards, clear and convincing evidence is easier, in my humble opinion, to prove than beyond a reasonable doubt. Okay, in my opinion. Although it's a higher standard than preponderance, which preponderance of the evidence is like the lower standard of proof. But as you can see here, guys, what's really the issue in this case is that small little window there, the short duration here of insanity, where she's going to say she experienced a temporary form of insanity. That's where she could easily win this case on an insanity defense. And I'm telling you, those experts are going to come in. It's going to be a battle of the experts, and they're going to talk about how these drugs could have caused psychosis, how she was overly drugged, overly drugged with all these different drugs, and could have contributed to her psychosis state, y'all. Okay. Mama Zach, did you ever take courses in body language to help you assess potential jury members and whether or not they were being honest? Yes, ma'am. I also, in undergrad, I majored in psychology. I have a bachelor's of science in psychology. So I strategically majored in psychology so I could study individuals during my legal career, because I always wanted to be an attorney, but I knew that having that psychology background would really enable me to be skilled at being a prosecutor, because I've always wanted to be a prosecutor, always wanted to be a trial attorney. So yes, definitely as a part of my studies in psychology, we did study body language for sure. We studied that. And even in my studies of criminal justice, we did look at body language. So yeah, that was a part of my studies. So I was good at jury selection. I won all my trials. I haven't lost a trial yet. The first trial I lost. Okay. As a prosecutor, I never lost a trial as a criminal prosecutor. But when I went into family law, those were more difficult cases in that you've got to deal with child custody matters. So it wasn't that I lost. It was that the judge wanted to be fair to both parents. So they would just split the visitation issues and stuff like that. So it was just more of it's different in family court where they're looking at the interest of the child more so than you're in a criminal case and you're trying to prosecute somebody for crime. Total different interests that are involved in those type of legal matters. But yeah, definitely did take some body language courses, Mama Zach. We're going to have to watch this case, girl, because this case can go either way. Mama Zach says, that makes me sick. I understand that people lie, but if you're under oath, for the love of God, be honest. Girl, I wish in a perfect world we'd have people that were honest, but in reality, honey, no. People don't respect the law or being under oath. They don't. They easily lie while they're under oath. We see it happen all the time, as sad as it is. In my experience as an attorney, I've had witnesses go up and deliberately lie, and I had to impeach them each and every time. And they didn't care that they were under oath. They just was lying the whole entire time. And every sentence, literally, I had to impeach them with a prior inconsistent statement that they had said to an officer or in another hearing or a deposition or whatever. So based on my experience, you guys, practicing as an attorney, people don't care about being under oath, as sad as it is, girl. I wish in a perfect world people respected the law and respected being under oath and the integrity and all that. Girl, it's not a reality, my love. It's not a reality. Mama Zach, I don't know. I believe that she had postpartum depression, but I can't say that it reached psychosis. And I think she needs to go away for what she did. I'm with you, Mama Zach. Girl, I agree with you 100%. I think she needs to go to prison. That's my take. Like I said, I have a different perspective on it. I'm seeing a lot of people cover this case, and a lot of them are on her side and empathetic. And I'm just like, I don't know. I have a different take on it, y'all. I have a different take on this case. I think she should go to prison. I don't think she was experiencing psychosis. I think she's lying because she never talked about hearing voices until all of a sudden when her defense attorney meets with her and then has her meet with his psychiatrist or whatever. All of a sudden now she's bringing up voices when she never heard that before. So I feel like he talked to her and tried to get her to say that because he wants to go with an insanity defense. So, and he's a good attorney, y'all. I'm just saying. So I'm with you, Mama Zach. I agree with you, girl. I'm actually shocked that you actually think that way because everybody else is 100% on her side. And I was trying to be very careful with this case because I don't want to make those beautiful mothers out there mad at me. I understand postpartum. I feel empathy for the mothers that are experiencing it. It's very real. And it's unfortunate that we don't talk about it enough. And we need more care for parents that are dealing with postpartum because it's real and they need effective and affordable treatment. Effective and affordable treatment, you guys. It's not fair that these mothers have to suffer with this alone and in silence because they're embarrassed. What parent wants to go around saying that they resent their child? That's very humiliating and just it's horrible to tell someone that you resent your child, guys. It makes you feel like you're a monster. So I understand mothers going through postpartum and I express my deepest empathy, but you don't hear every day of mothers going out and unaliving their kids. So there's something different about this case, you guys, that led her to go that extra mile and actually carry it out. Was she overly sedated with these drugs, y'all? Who knows? Who knows? But it looks like she was so depressed that she wanted to end her life, but she wanted to take her kids out with her. Her whole goal was that she was going to die too. It wasn't that she was going to be alive at this. Her plan failed. But see, she couldn't face the fact that she was going to leave her kids behind. She wanted to take her children with her, which was the selfish act of it, in my opinion, was a carefully thought out crime, in my opinion, that she knew she wanted to do this. She knew she wanted to take her life out. It was a very selfish act, in my opinion, of her to want to take her kids right along with her in the act. And didn't think anything about her husband and how he would feel at all, period. Because she was really depressed and feeling hopeless and didn't want to be here anymore. And she thought, I'm going to take my kids with me because I can't bear for them to be here without me. That's selfish, in my opinion. I know this is controversial. Let me get off this video before y'all get mad at me. Sorry, y'all. I'm just giving my opinion. I'm pretty sure you guys have your own perspective too. And please don't beat me up because of my opinion. Y'all know these topics we talk about are very controversial and you may not agree with everything I say, and I understand, and you don't have to agree with me. I'm interested in hearing what you have to say, but litigate your case, give your opinion with dignity and grace. Just be kind and tell me your perspective and I'll tell you mine, and we can have a nice, beautiful, open dialogue. All right, guys, thank you. I've talked your ear off enough. I'm going to go ahead and sign out. I love you all so dearly. Let's pray for this family. Let's pray for these beautiful kids, and may these lovely children rest in peace. Take care.